Hollywood's Golden Age, 6 Dark Legacies. The Golden Age of Hollywood is remembered for its glamour, the tuxedos, the searchlights, the larger-than-life stars who seemed untouchable on screen and off. But behind the studio system's carefully managed image, the era also protected some of its biggest names through scandal, misconduct, and outright crime. These are 6 of the most documented cases, verified through court records, contemporaneous news coverage, memoirs, and on-record testimony of stars whose off-screen conduct stood in stark contrast to their on-screen legend. Errol Flynn, the trial that followed him to the grave. By the early 1940s, Errol Flynn was one of the biggest stars in the world, a swashbuckling leading man in hits like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. In October 1942, that image collided with the law. 2 teenagers, 17-year-old Betty Hansen and 15-year-old Peggy Satterley, separately accused Flynn of statutory rape. Hansen over an incident at a Bel Air party, Satterley over an earlier encounter aboard Flynn's yacht in 1941. Los Angeles prosecutors combined the complaints into a single case, and Flynn was charged with 3 counts of statutory rape. The trial, held over January and February 1943, became a media sensation. Flynn's attorney, Jerry Giesler, built the defense around discrediting the accusers' credibility, questioning their honesty, their sexual histories, and even the physical details of their accounts, down to whether the moon could have been visible through a specific porthole on the night in question. After nearly 24 hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted Flynn on all counts. One juror said afterward that the panel simply didn't believe the girls' stories. The acquittal didn't erase the trial's cultural impact. It became one of the defining examples of how star power and skilled legal defense could overwhelm serious accusations in that era, and the case is still studied today as a case study in celebrity justice. Flynn's career declined in the years that followed, worn down by alcohol and drug abuse. He died of a heart attack in 1959 at just 50 years old. Kirk Douglas, talent, temper, and an allegation that outlived him. Kirk Douglas built his career on intensity, as Spartacus, as Vincent Van Gogh in Lust for Life, as one of the defining leading men of the studio era. Colleagues and directors, including Stanley Kubrick, who worked with him twice, describe him as one of the most driven actors in Hollywood and one of the hardest to manage. Crew members on his films frequently described a volatile temper and a demand for control that extended well past his own performance. The more serious allegation attached to Douglas's name did not surface publicly until decades later. In her 2018 memoir, Natalie Wood's sister Lana Wood wrote that Natalie had told her Douglas raped her in the 1950s, when Natalie was still a teenager. It's important to be precise about what this is. An allegation made in a memoir written after Natalie Wood's death, relayed secondhand by her sister. Douglas was never charged, and the claim has not been independently corroborated through legal proceedings. It remains a serious and widely reported allegation, not a proven fact, and it resurfaced as part of a broader public reckoning with Hollywood's history following his death in 2020 at age 103. Faye Dunaway, an Oscar-winning career overshadowed by reputation. Faye Dunaway's early career is one of the strongest runs any American actress has had. Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, Chinatown in 1974, Network in 1976, for which she won the Academy Award for Best Actress. But her reputation on set became, over time, nearly as well documented as her filmography. The clearest account comes from Rutanya Alder, who played Carol in opposite Dunaway in 1981's Mommy Dearest and later published a behind-the-scenes memoir, The Mommy Dearest Diary. Alder described a set where people despised Faye because she was so rude to people, saying that everyone was on pins and needles when she worked and everyone relaxed when she didn't. According to account from multiple cast and crew members, Dunaway's demanding process, repeated costume and hair sessions, disputes over lighting, extended delays, pushed the production to the brink, and she was reportedly nearly fired by Paramount during filming. Betty Davis, asked years later on The Tonight Show to name her least favorite person in Hollywood, answered simply, Faye Dunaway. The film that generated most of these stories, ironically, was itself about an abusive parent, and several who worked on it noted the discomfort of watching an actor's off-camera intensity blur into the character she was playing. Dunaway has largely declined to discuss the film in interviews since, at times ending press conversations if the subject comes up. John Wayne, the icon in the interview that wouldn't stay buried. For much of the 20th century, John Wayne stood as a symbol of a particular version of America, rugged, plain-spoken, unyielding. Colleagues on his sets often described him as commanding, sometimes intimidating, insisting on discipline from cast and crew alike. Actor Christopher Mitchum, who worked with him, once said that when Wayne got angry, everyone around him felt it. What did lasting, verifiable damage to that image was Wayne's own words. In a 1971 interview with Playboy, Wayne discussed race, land, and American history in terms that read very differently in hindsight than they may have to some readers at the time. He told the magazine, "I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility. I don't believe in giving authority and positions of leadership and judgment to irresponsible people." On Native American land claims, he argued that white settlement had been a matter of survival and defended the displacement of Native peoples in those terms. The interview also included dismissive remarks about gay representation in film. For decades, the interview existed mostly in academic and journalistic archives. It resurfaced widely online in 2019 and 2020, prompting renewed public debate, including a 2020 decision by the University of Southern California's Film School to remove a campus exhibit honoring Wayne, and calls in some cities to reconsider his name. Wayne's family has argued the remarks reflected a single interview taken out of the context of his broader life and relationships. The interview itself, however, is a matter of public record, not allegation. Roman Polanski, a guilty plea and 4 decades as a fugitive. Roman Polanski's case is one of the few on this list that isn't a matter of accusation, testimony, or dispute. It is a matter of a formal guilty plea. In March 1977, Polanski, then 43, was arrested and charged with 6 offenses against a 13-year-old girl, Samantha Gailey, now known as Samantha Gima, following a photo session at Jack Nicholson's Los Angeles home. The original charges included rape by use of drugs and sodomy. As part of a plea agreement, 5 of the 6 charges were dropped, and Polanski pleaded guilty to a single count, unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor. He was ordered to undergo a 90-day psychiatric evaluation, of which he served 42 days before being released. Then, in February 1978, on the eve of his formal sentencing, after learning the judge intended to impose additional prison time, Polanski fled the United States. He has not returned since, settling first in England and then in France, where citizenship and legal protections have shielded him from extradition for over 4 decades. Despite this, Polanski continued to direct acclaimed films from Europe, including The Pianist, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Director in 2003, an award he could not travel to the United States to accept in person. Samantha Gima herself has said publicly, more than once, that she has forgiven Polanski and wishes the case will be allowed to close. Others in the industry and public have continued to view his fugitive status and the underlying guilty plea as an unresolved matter of accountability. Both of those things, her stated forgiveness and the unresolved legal case, are part of the documented record, and they don't cancel each other out. Mickey Rooney, from the top of the box office to a Senate hearing on elder abuse. Mickey Rooney's career began earlier and lasted longer than almost anyone else on this list. By his late teens, in the years surrounding the Andy Hardy film series, he was the single highest-paid, highest-billed star in the United States. He married 8 times over his life, and several of those marriages ended in accusations of infidelity and financial chaos. Ava Gardner, his first wife, later described their marriage in famously unflattering terms. The most serious documented chapter of Rooney's life came at its very end, and this time he was the one testifying, not the one accused. In 2011, at age 90, Rooney appeared before the United States Senate Special Committee on Aging to testify about his own experience of elder abuse. According to court filings and Rooney's own sworn testimony, his stepson, Christopher Abba, had taken control of his finances, restricted his access to food and mail, and diverted the actor's earnings into accounts Abba controlled. Allegations a Los Angeles court found serious enough to grant Rooney a restraining order and a court-appointed conservator. "My money was taken and misused," Rooney told the committee, fighting back tears. "I was literally left powerless." Abba later agreed to a $2.8 million civil settlement, though reporting indicates little of it was ever paid. When Rooney died in 2014 at age 93, after roughly 70 years in the film industry and more than 300 screen credits, his estate held approximately $18,000. What these 6 stories have in common. Taken individually, these are 6 very different lives. A swashbuckler acquitted in a courtroom, a screen legend accused only after his death, a director who pleaded guilty and fled the country, an icon undone by his own words in a magazine interview, an Oscar winner whose reputation on set outlasted her films, and a child star who ended his life testifying about his own abuse. What connects them isn't a single pattern of villainy. It's a more uncomfortable truth about the era that produced them. Fame, at that scale, bought protection. Studios buried complaints, juries were swayed by charisma, and decades sometimes had to pass before the full record. Court transcripts, sworn testimony, published memoirs, caught up with what insiders had known all along. Some of what's listed here is proven fact. Some is credible, unresolved allegation. Telling the difference matters, even when, especially when, the story is uncomfortable either way.